In the summer of 1995, a 26-year-old woman stood at the southern edge of California's Mojave Desert, staring down the vast and unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Crest Trail. Her backpack, an overstuffed behemoth she would later name Monster, towered over her small frame. Her body was untrained, her boots a half size too small, and her knowledge of wilderness survival nearly non-existent. Yet, Cheryl had no choice but to go forward. Her life, once seemingly filled with promise, lay in ruins. She had lost her mother, her rock, her anchor, to a sudden and cruel battle with lung cancer. Her marriage had crumbled, a casualty of her reckless decisions and self-destruction. The family that she once felt so tightly knit had unraveled, and in its wake, Cheryl had spiraled into a darkness she no longer recognized. Drugs, one-night stands, a lingering hollow pain that could not be drowned by heroin or forgotten in fleeting encounters with strangers. With nothing left to hold on to, she latched onto one last desperate idea: to walk herself back to life. And so, with trembling hands, she strapped on Monster, took a deep breath, and stepped into the wild. Part 1. Into the Fire. The Pacific Crest Trail stretches 2,650 miles from the deserts of California to the dense forest of Washington. Cheryl's goal was not to walk all of it, but to cover an ambitious 1,100 miles beginning in the Mojave and finishing at the Bridge of the Gods, where Oregon meets Washington. From the very first steps, she realized the depth of her unpreparedness. The desert was a furnace. The sun beat down mercilessly, baking the land into a lifeless husk. She struggled to find shade, rationed her limited water supply, and quickly learned the brutal truth of the trail. Nature does not care about your past, your pain, or your regrets. It simply is. Her pack, loaded with books, a camping stove, a tent, extra clothes, and things she never even used, felt like it would crush her. The straps of her bag dug into her shoulders, and each step sent shockwaves of pain through her untested body. On her second day, she encountered a scorpion crawling near her sleeping bag. On the third, a rattlesnake. On the fifth, she cried alone in the wilderness, questioning why she had come. But each day, she put on one foot in front of the other. Part 2. Breaking and Mending. As Cheryl pressed deeper into the Pacific Crest Trail, the trail began to reshape her, physically and mentally. The blisters on her feet multiplied. Her toenails turned black and began to fall off. She bled, she ached, she fell, and she failed. Then came the boots. It happened in a moment of clumsiness, a simple misstep on a rocky slope. One of her hiking boots dislodged from her foot and tumbled down into the canyon below. She stood in stunned silence as the boot, her lifeline, disappeared into the abyss. Desperate, she threw her remaining boot after it. If one was gone, what was the point of the other? Now, barefoot, with hundreds of miles still ahead of her, she had no choice but to press on. Using duct tape and sandals, she kept moving until she reached a resupply stop where a new pair of boots awaited her. They were half a size too big, but it hardly mattered. By then, her pain tolerance had grown stronger than her feet. But Cheryl was not alone on Pacific Crest Trail. Fellow hikers, strangers who became family, offered words of encouragement, shared food, and helped her navigate the treacherous terrain. Trail angels, kind strangers who lived along the Pacific Crest Trail, left caches of water in the driest regions, provided rides to nearby towns, and sometimes even offered warm meals. Their generosity reminded Cheryl that kindness still existed in the world. Part 3. The Mountains of the Memory. By the time she reached the Sierra Nevada, Cheryl had changed. The trail had stripped her down to her most essential self. Each day was a fight for survival, but for the first time in years, she felt something other than the grief. She felt alive. Still, the ghost of her past traveled with her. As she climbed the towering peaks of the Sierra, she thought of her mother, of the way she had danced in the kitchen, of the hospital room where Cheryl had watched her die. She thought of her marriage, of the man she had once loved and betrayed, of the mistakes she wished she could erase. She thought of her years lost to self-destruction, of the empty beds and the drug-filled nights. She thought of the moments she had wanted to give up. And then she thought of herself, not the broken girl who had set foot on the trail, but the woman she was becoming. A woman who had learned to set up camp in the dark. A woman who had learned to endure. A woman who could face a storm and walk through it. One night, high in the mountains, she stood alone under a sky so clear that Milky Way stretched above her like a cosmic river. She had never seen anything so vast, so infinite. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she felt small in a way that wasn't terrifying. She felt free. Part 4. The Final Miles. As summer turned to fall, Cheryl neared the end of her journey. Her legs, once weak, had become strong. The weight of monster, which had once crushed her, now felt like an extension of herself. The trail had given her scars, but it has also given her strength. When she finally reached the Bridge of the Guards, where Oregon met Washington, she stood at the edge and looked at the river below. She had done it. The trail had not erased her pain. It had not brought her mother back and undone her past mistakes. But it had given her something far more valuable. The understanding that she could survive. That she could keep going. That she could start over. Cheryl Strayed had walked herself back to life. Epilogue. A question for you. As Cheryl crossed the final bridge, she was not the same person who had begun the journey. The Pacific Crest Trail had reshaped her in ways she never could have imagined. And now, I ask you, have you ever reached a point in your life where everything felt lost? What did you do to find your way back? If you could embark on a journey, physical or emotional, that would push you to your limits, what would it be? What is the monster on your back? What burdens do you carry? And what would it take to finally set them down? The Pacific Crest Trail did not heal Cheryl Strayed. She healed herself. The trail was merely the path she took to get there. What path will you take? Please comment below and subscribe to Cliffhanger, and I will bring you more stories like this. Take care until next time.